Another quick tie. Your next fly starts here.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Quick Tie. My name is Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Bow Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. And we are tying up quite a fly tonight. We have the Dancin' Ricky Stone. This is what we're gonna be tying up for you. You can see it there on the screen. Beautiful fly, lots of pieces and moving parts, but we'll get you through it, no problem. Want to say a quick thank you to Western Canada Fly Fishing Guide School for sponsoring this quick tie for you. If you have any questions about the school at all, don't hesitate to reach out. You can see some information below there. Head over to their website or give us a call and we can answer any questions you might have about it. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. Drop us a comment, let us know what you think of the video and if you enjoyed this fly or not. I'm going to be tying out of my Season 7, Episode 5 kit. So I'm going to go into there and then I'm going to grab my Episode 5. And you can see you got two flies in there. Grab the one with all the green dubbing. That is going to be this Dancin' Ricky Stone that we're going to be going through here shortly. If you're tying out of our individual kits, same material, packaging looks a little different, but that's the only difference. And if you don't have any of our materials, that's fine. Head on over to our website, and there's a full fly recipe for this fly, like you can see in front of me there. And you can just follow along with your own materials, and we'll get you through this. All right, why delay? Let's head over to the vise and take a peek at this fly. So this is what we're tying up. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, that's a lot of foam, you are not wrong. There is a lot of steps, but it is a very cool, very floatable fly. We'll put it that way. You're gonna see it and it's gonna float well. And that's one of the biggest frustrations sometimes with fish and foam is it doesn't have enough foam to float. So super cool pattern and let's get at it and take you through this. I'm gonna get that hook out of the vise. And as you can see, the hook that we're using is a bit of a different shape than normal, and it's very specific to this pattern. So we've got this bend in the hook. It's a good marker for us, but it also gives a bit of dynamic appearance to this fly just based off of how it's curved around the hook, kind of like a stonefly would be in the water. Tonight I'm going to be tying with some UTC 140 in olive. I think this is a great color for this pattern with the color scheme that we're tying tonight in this kind of green dubbing, and is what I'm going to be going with. I'm gonna start my thread right kind of where that bend is in the hook, and I'm gonna start working it back and down a little bit, and then I'll come in here and I'm gonna trim out that tag end. And now the very first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna grab a piece of the peach-ish colored foam, tan or peach, whatever you think it looks like, and we're gonna be tying this material in right off the bat. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here and cut myself a little point. This is just to aid in tying it in. I like to do this. And we're gonna start tying this in right back just in front of that bend in the hook. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lay this down and I'm gonna take my first wrap kind of on the point of that foam, and then I'm just gonna turn it so it's flat right up on top of the hook shank. And I'm just gonna start taking securing wraps, not going super crazy tight yet, but I'm just doing open spiraling wraps back and down. And we do wanna take this a little ways into the bend of the hook. So I'm gonna grab that last one. It's gonna probably be the last one, but you can see I go down into that bend a little ways. Now I'm just gonna work my thread back up, and I'm gonna drive quite a bit of thread wraps in here and compress that foam down. Something that this does is it aids in, again, it's more foam and it's less dubbing we're gonna have to put on here because we've created a little bulk from putting this foam down first. And we're gonna eventually be pulling this foam up and over the dubbing we put in. But let's get right to that dubbing. That's the next material that's going in. We're gonna be creating what we call a dubbing noodle. So we're gonna be grabbing a piece of this dubbing, placing my fingers on my thread. Oh, look at that gorgeous fingernail. First look at a smash nail, I guess, this season. I'm gonna be twisting that on in one direction, okay? I'm not doing this back and forth. I'm just gonna spin in one direction to put that dubbing on. And we wanna create a bit of a taper, so thinner at the back and a little thicker dubbing up at the head. We are gonna be driving thread wraps through it as we go as well. So you're gonna see that we can kind of change and create that little bit of taper as we want. But you can see I'm just spinning it on just like that. If we get not a super, it's not a super even taper when it's on the thread, that's okay, because we just choose how many times we wrap it in a certain place on the hook shank and we can create the taper we want. It's gonna take a couple of times of building this up to get all the way up to where we wanna be. So don't worry about it, get 3-4 inches of dubbing on there and we'll start wrapping right back here, and then I'll have to add some more again. You gotta work around the point of that hook, but you wanna make sure that you get thread wraps right up against that foam. And then we're just gonna be doing touching wraps with that dubbing. If you got to come in here and tighten it up on your thread again, you can do that. We're just going to keep working this forward. Right up here. And like you see there, I did 2 wraps in one spot just because I felt that taper wasn't as even as I want it to be. I'm going to come back to my dubbing again. We're going to make another little noodle. This one isn't going to have to be as long, obviously. We're almost up to where we need to be. That might be enough to do it. If not, we'll add some more. And if you have too much on there, you can always take some off. Now, sometimes you'll see me, I'm just coming back in and wrapping it tighter on the thread again, just making sure that I've got it nice and tight as it goes on. Just like that. Okay, I'm happy with that landed. Take my thread wrap, kind of 1 wrap back into the edge of that dubbing. And now I'm gonna fold this foam up and over and forward on top of this dubbing like this. And now we're gonna create some segments with our thread wraps. And I'm gonna teach you how we're gonna do that here in just a moment. But I'm gonna bring that forward. I'm just being a little of a perfectionist, but I wanna add just a tiny bit more dubbing. I wanna be pretty much right up to the edge of that bend. What you're gonna realize with this fly real quick is we have a ton of materials to go in at this one tie-in spot, and that's gonna be basically right here. So don't wanna overdo it, but we also wanna get a good amount of body. So I'm gonna pull this forward. I'm not really stretching or pulling too hard, but I am gonna lay it down tight, come up over top, get the 1 thread wrap, and we're gonna do this for all the foam we put in. I basically take 1 loose, and on that second one, I'm gonna pull tight. You don't wanna pull so tight that you tear the foam or cut through it, but once I get that couple of loose, tight, then I can pull down hard and it's not gonna cut through. Now I'm left with something like this, kind of looks like some weird looking beetle thing. We're gonna fix that here in a moment. I wanna come in here and trim this out as close as I can. And I'm even gonna come back in here and trim off those corners. This is gonna be a very busy and bulky area right here, so I wanna take as much of that out of it as I can so I can compress that down. Now we're gonna use this, it's called a crossover technique, and that's how we're gonna go back and down the fly. And I'm gonna create segments like we showed you in this portion of the fly. You can see all those segments that are created. And this tie was tied with black thread, but I'll show you what this is gonna look like with the green, but it's the same thing. We're wrapping up and over that. So how I'm gonna do this first is I never wanna show my work below at an angle. I wanna just have clean wraps going around. So the first bump I'm gonna do is gonna be a big one. It's gonna be the first segment. So all I've done, I'll show you once I get down here, is I've done a crossover wrap, created my first bubble, then I do 1 full wrap over top and secure. Now again, I'm just gonna come up here, do the next one, see if I can do this from this angle, cross over, and pull tight. And now we're just gonna continue to create segments like that, back and down the fly. And in a perfect world, the segments are gonna either stay similar in size or get a little smaller as they go back. And that just kind of creates that realistic buggy. I'm gonna try to sneak 1 more in that back portion. But you gotta work around that hook point, which is a little tough. But it looks something like that. So then from the underside, what the fish is seeing is they're just seeing that segmentation, which is kind of a neat little look to it. Now, to get back up the fly, I gotta do everything in reverse. So once I've got my full wrap around, now I'm gonna come up here and cross over to this one. And so when I'm done doing this and I've made it back up the fly, it's gonna look like a whole bunch of X's up on top of the foam. I gotta just do this from my view so I can see it, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So I'm crossing over, do a 1 wrap around, crossing over, 1 wrap around, crossing over, 1 wrap around. So at the end, it's gonna look like this. So all I have to show for work underneath is my single wraps that go through the dubbing, and from on top, fish doesn't see it, so it doesn't matter. So we do our work on top of the foam instead of doing it underneath where the fish is gonna be able to see it. Gonna put a couple of thread wraps in there. Look from on top, make sure that foam is nice and centered. I'm up on top of the hook shank itself, and there we go. That's our main part of our body. Really buggy looking, super neat. Now, before we do anything else, we're gonna actually finish dubbing the front of the fly. I just find this is a little easier if you do this right now than coming back and doing it after. We have a lot of foam and legs that are all gonna go into this, and this is just a little easier to do this right now than to do it later. Now, I don't really need to dub where my thread is right there because that is gonna be a continual tie-in point. So I'm just gonna dub forward. This first time forward, I'm not too concerned about creating any tape or anything because I'm actually gonna be coming back up with my dubbing again, back to that tie-in point. So I'm just gonna lay down a general base, and then I'm gonna work my way back to that tying point. And that's where I'll worry about trying to have a little bit thicker head, a little bit thinner as we come back to our foam. I'm gonna just continue leaving my space, a little bit of space right behind the eye. And then I'm just gonna come back and work my way back. Get that nice and tight. Just roping that material as it goes on. And work my way back. Add just a little bit more. And we'll be back to that foam before you know it. Just again, just kind of watching that taper. If I need to add anywhere. And I'm happy with that, looks good. The dubbing's gonna always look a little messy, and that's definitely not the end of the world. So then I wanna bring my thread right back up against that foam. Now the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go to our yellow foam, okay? So the yellow one is gonna be, it's gonna also form a piece of the body, and then we're gonna go the wing on top of this. But on this one, I wanna cut a little bit of a point into it. So not super long point, but I'm just cutting from the sides of the back of the foam to create a point. This is gonna give a little bit of shape to the fly, okay? Now when I lay this back on, how far I want it back is where I started the cut on the edges for that point. You can see where I started them there. I want that part to be right at the back of where I left my foam on the back of the hook. So it's gonna extend a little bit beyond there. Now all I wanna do, just like we talked about when we were putting in the other foam, is we're gonna lay this right on top, do our kind of first loose wrap, take a second wrap, make sure it's right up on top where we want it, and then I can pull tight. And then add a few more after that. Now this tie-in point has a whole ton of material that's gonna go into it. So just try to stay back against those segmented pieces the best you can when we start tying stuff in here. Now, I know I don't need foam that's gonna extend very far in front of that eye, so I'm just gonna come up here and trim this out just so it gives me a little bit more space, but that foam will eventually come up to the eye, so I gotta make sure I have enough to get there. Now, this next portion is, we're actually gonna tie in some flash. So this is gonna be a little bit of an underwing flash. So you have some crystal flash in your kit. This is just a long strand I have here. What I wanna do is I wanna double it over twice. So I make my first double over, I create my loop at the bottom, I'm gonna come down here and cut it. So now I've got 2 strands. I'm gonna double it over one more time, which when I cut it should give me 4 strands. Line up those tips. Come in here, snip it out again. Now I should have 4 full strands in my hands. Now what I wanna do is I wanna double that over my thread. So I'll come down here, evenly double it over. The best that I can, keep it even. And then when I come up here, I'm just gonna lift up, pull down on that doubled over flash and secure it right there. A couple more thread wraps. Now, the reason we double it over like that, not just tie it in at the edges, this is all about durability. If that were to start slipping out, they'd have to pull a whole long piece to get it to come around because I've doubled it over. So it's a lot more security for the fly itself. Now, when I pull this back, I'm gonna trim this right away and I wanna cut it just beyond the back point of that yellow foam. It's gonna stand up right now, don't worry about it. Everything's gonna get pulled back with the next pieces of foam we put in. But it does feel kind of awkward at first because there's gonna be a lot of foam here. Now I want you to go back to your peach or your tan foam. And on this one, we're gonna be doubling it over and tying it in at the same spot. So I'm gonna pre-cut this foam. So I'm just gonna lay it in here as if I had tied it in, doubled over. I want it to be roughly the same length as that yellow foam. So I'm just marking that with my fingers. And I'm gonna come and cut that off right there. It doesn't have to be a perfect science if one's a little longer, whatever, it's not the end of the world. But then what I wanna do is I'm just gonna square this off like the wing of a stonefly a little bit, get a little shape. So I'm just gonna take just the very corners off of that foam. So I'm left with something that looks like that. Now when I tie this in, you see I've folded it. I'm trying to pinch it to kind of create a crease so I can see my spot. I'm gonna tie it in right in the middle, kind of like we did with that flash, we just can't actually pull it down the thread. I'm gonna make my tie-in right here. One loose, one tight, start to pull, add a few more, tighten again. So now I'm left with something that looks like this, okay? But don't worry if those wings aren't perfectly matched, it's not the end of the world, it's more about that shape, because when they're up here, they are. When you lean them back, one's a little longer, not the end of the world, okay? We're almost done up at this tie-in point. There's a lot going on here, but we're almost there. Now, the last kind of cider thing we're gonna do, besides the orange foam we tie in, is we're gonna tie in a piece of this parapost. So I'm gonna take off maybe a 2-inch piece. I wanna make sure it's nice and fluffy. You can comb it out or just kind of wisp it, make sure it's nice and fluffy. I'm gonna take just a little bit off of this because it's just a little bit much. And then I'm gonna tie this in the same way I did with that flash. I wanna tie it in right in the middle. So I'm gonna lay it in here. Again, I'm gonna thread wrap up and over, secure it, pull the other piece up and over, a couple more thread wraps. Now, as you can tell, we got a lot of stuff coming in up here. We got this really thick tying point. I know it feels like it's congested, but it'll all kind of come together here in the next few steps. So now that I've got my wing in, I'm not gonna quite cut that yet. I will in a moment though. Now I want you to go to your brown foam. And we're gonna do a little different cut. So I'm gonna cut it first and show you after what it looks like. I'm basically doing a point, but in reverse. And the reason I do this is it's gonna give a little slot for that parapost to stand up once I tie this in, okay? So it's giving it a little groove. So this essentially is gonna come in here and sit like this, and that parapost can get locked in that groove and still stand up nice and tall so we can see, but at the same time, we're trying to push that wing back a little bit. So as I come in here, I want this to go up a little ways onto that wing, okay? A little past the fork that I cut into it. I'm gonna secure this brown foam right here. Same method we have been doing, loose, tighter, tighter, nice and secure, make sure it's right up on top. And now that's what it should look like from on top. So now that parapost has something to kind of sit up in, into that groove, and it should still work as a good piece of cider material. Now we're almost there, guys, with the foam. One more piece of foam to set in here, and that is gonna be our orange cider foam. Okay, this is just, again, to help you see this fly a little better. And when I tie in this one, I'm gonna tie it just kind of up against that brown one, not overlapping. I don't want it to be longer. I just want it to be kind of up into that fork just a little ways. And this is the one that's really gonna hold back the previous foam we tied in. Let's tie that one in, get down tight on it, and we should be left with something that looks like that. Okay? Okay, you thought we were done here, but not quite. We still got some legs to put in at this tie-in point, and then we're gonna move forward to the front of the fly and get some legs up there too. So in your kit, you've got these brown barred legs. What I'd like you to do is go ahead and peel off a section of 2 of them like this. So there's 2 together there. I'm gonna do that again. So I have another piece of 2. Just like that. Now I'm gonna be tying in just a single overhand knot. Somewhere maybe not quite halfway, kind of if you split it into thirds, you want it to be at about the 3rd way point. I'm just gonna come in here. It's gonna be kind of hard to show you on camera, but I've just tied a single overhand knot in it. I'm gonna pull that nice and tight. And that's basically giving me a knuckle for the stonefly leg. So I've done that on one of those 2 pieces I grabbed. Now I want you to do it on the other section of the 2 paired. Once you get those tied in, we're left with something like this, okay? Now, we're gonna tie this in so that when we tie it in this spot, we want those legs to point back and down. So we don't wanna tie it, so if we flip this the other way, they'd be pointing probably straight out, yeah. So we wanna try to pick the way that when we tie it in, that it's gonna sit down generally and back. Now, when I tie this, I want that rear knuckle to extend to about the back of that under foam that we tied in. Not the back of the foam back here, but to the under foam. And once I get that roughly where I want it, I'm gonna come in here, do again, kind of a loose one. I'm just doing a couple of looser ones before I pull tight. And this is where I can come in here and work it down the edge of the foam a little bit, and hopefully that it's gonna be pointed backwards and down, which this one looks like it's gonna do, not too bad. So once I got that in there, I'm gonna take one more good securing wrap and pull a little tighter than I had been. Now I'm gonna do the same thing on the near side of the fly. So I'm gonna grab that other one that I knotted here. And I'm again gonna tie this one in, trying to orient it so that it's matching the same length and that it's also gonna be pointed back and down. And we're gonna have some tag ends of all these that we're gonna cut out at the end, but for right now, this is where I'm gonna come in here, look on top, match the knuckles so they're the same length. It's a good way to look right on top of the fly. So for you guys to see there, I've matched those knuckles so they look like they're about the same. And then from there, all I'm gonna do is start moving forward on the fly. So because I've got green thread and I'm not too concerned about it showing through that dubbing, I'm just gonna lift up here and I'm gonna do like one big open spiral wrap kind of on top so that it comes to that clear hook right there. I'm not really putting any damage to that front that front. You could also dub forward if you wanted to. I just find for time's sake, this is a bit better way to get a bunch of these tied up. Now, this first one I'm gonna do is pull down my yellow foam. I'm gonna lay it right here and I'm gonna tie this one in just behind the eye, secure that one down, make sure it's not going anywhere. And now I want you to just go grab a single piece of that barred rubber leg, just one single piece. And I'm gonna fold it around my thread, similar to how we did with that flash. And I'm gonna tie this in. Now this is gonna be the antenna of the stonefly. And don't worry about orientation of them. They're kind of just gonna go all over the place. But I wanna get a thread wrap behind them as well. And then as I lay forward my next piece of foam, I can then decide where these are gonna actually land. So then I wanna pull forward on my brown foam. And I'm gonna try to keep those antennae kind of locked in there in my fingers. And now I'm gonna come secure the brown foam. Like so. I'm gonna pinch down, get that secured. And this is where I'm gonna come in here and pull these antennae and get them kind of centered in that yellow foam. So when it's flipped up like this, they're kind of centered in the yellow foam. And then they should just lay straight out the front of the fly, no problem. Now, one more piece of foam to come down, and that's gonna be our orange cider foam. I'm gonna lay that one down, come in on top, secure this one. This will be the last foam we have to secure down before we go to a little bit more leg work. Just like that. Okay, now first thing I wanna do is go build myself some more of those legs we just discussed. So I need to have, again, you gotta have 2 sections of those barred legs tied because we're gonna create some more knuckles. So I'm gonna grab a couple more pieces here, exactly like we did the back ones, tie that overhand knot in them about 1/3 of the way back down that section. And we're gonna do the exact same thing for tying in as we did on the last ones. Just gonna be out the front of the fly this time. And you can always put a drop of super glue on there if you're worried about that coming undone as well. I've never really had much issue with that, but sometimes it can do that. Now I wanna try to match the length that knuckle is out in front of the fly to match where it was out the other way, out the back of the fly. So once I think it's roughly the same, it's more important that the front ones match each other, that then they match the back. But I'm gonna tie in this near side one first, which I like where that's sitting. I'll go to my other one. And again, you can kind of tell how it's gonna orient. So I think I'm gonna tie it down this way. And we're gonna try to match that up. Work around all these other legs. That worked out pretty good. Again, look from on top, and yeah, that looks like everything is pretty matched up. Okay, so that is almost all the legs we gotta tie. We are gonna do one more step that I'll show you at the end. So right now, what I wanna start by doing is I'm gonna do maybe just a couple more securing wraps in this tie-in position just to make sure everything's locked down. And then I'm gonna pull everything back and take some thread wraps up here in front of the eye. Now we're either gonna come in here and whip finish or use your half hitch tool, whichever you prefer. I'm just gonna grab my half hitch here quick, slide it up over the eye, get a couple of good knots, make sure that's good and tight, and then we can go ahead and snip out our thread. We can set that aside. And now we just gotta start cutting legs and cutting foam. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here and snip out the length of my parapost wing. So this I don't want to be super long, roughly halfway back down that peach colored foam. And I'll pull that out like that. So that's just a little piece of white cider. Then I'm gonna come forward, pull those antennae out of the way so you're not cutting them. And we're just gonna leave just a little bit of a head on that yellow foam. We're just gonna cut it right off flat. Then I'm gonna bring down my brown foam and match that same distance and that same length. Again, being sure not to cut your antenna. So my brown's matching. And then the orange one, we're gonna cut shorter than the brown one, just by a little bit. So it looks something like that. So if you're looking at the foam from the top, looks something like that. Okay. All right, foam's cut, everything's good. Now we just gotta start trimming legs. So first thing I want you to do is go on the knuckled legs, so the front and back pair. And on the bottom portion, I just want you to separate the legs up to the knuckle. Okay, so go around your fly real quick. Separate all those. If you just kind of pull on them, they should come apart not too bad for you. And we're actually gonna trim out just one of the legs. But I like to separate them all first and get a look at them, because then you can see if one's hanging down a little better than the other one, then you just cut out the opposite leg. And the big thing to remember when we cut them So like on this one, I can tell the one's hanging down a little nicer than the other one. When I come in to cut, I don't want to cut right close to the knuckle. I'm going to leave just a little bit of extra there, a little tag. You can see like that, because I don't want to have that slip in that knot come undone. So I'm just cutting it a little, not quite all the way to the knot. And I'm going to go around and just choose on all 4 of those ones, which one's hanging a little more straight down that I like. Make your choice and then trim out the other one. Good. Now, these guys here in the middle that are technically the tag ends of those knuckled legs, we're gonna cut them off too, and we are gonna leave them just a little bit of space. We're not gonna cut them off super close for the same reason. Gives the fly a little more durability. They're not gonna slip out. I'm gonna cut all 4 of those. Just definitely be mindful you're not cutting the wrong legs. Now I'm gonna come up to the antenna and I'm gonna cut them about in half. I don't want them to be super long, so the antenna I'm gonna cut there. Now, I need to cut my knuckled legs. You know, just use your imagination. I say most of the time I'm gonna leave it the same length that they are off of that fly. So from here to here is about the same length I'm gonna cut. But more or less, I just wanna match them so they're all similar length when I go around the fly. Something like that. Okay, so they're all pretty similar. Now we have one more thing we gotta do, and I want you to grab one of those tag ends that we cut off of the knuckled pieces, so they should still be in a double. I want you to trim or to pull them apart so they're just a single. Now grab a spare hook from your kit, because this one just happens to work perfect. And I'm gonna actually be inserting this rubber leg right in the middle of this foam. It makes them sit perfectly straight and adds a really good look to this. So I want you to put your hook, the eye of the hook between the orange and the brown foam and just kind of wiggle it through till it pops out like that. Now I'm gonna come in here and feed that rubber leg through the eye. And it's almost too tight, but I know that it goes through. I've done this a few times with these hooks, so just mess with it till you can get it to go through the eye, like that one starting. And just pull a little piece of it so it sits kind of like that, okay? Now I'm gonna pull back on this hook and it's gonna pull that rubber leg right through. And then I can remove the hook off of it. I'm gonna center it in that foam piece and make sure I kind of have equal length on either side. If you see that like that, it kind of sits perfectly straight out, which is a really nice additive to how those legs sit on this fly. Now the one last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull it so one side is a little further out. I'm gonna come in here with just the smallest dab of super glue, and so that this leg doesn't slip out of the fly itself, I'm just gonna put a little touch at the midway point, and I'm gonna pull that in. Now that sucker's gonna lock in there and be glued into that foam, and it's not gonna go anywhere at all. And I am gonna trim those ones up just a little bit because they are a little bit long as well. So I'm left with something that looks like that. Super cool looking stonefly, guys. Hopefully that worked out well for you guys and you guys were able to follow along. Again, that's the Dancing Ricky Stonefly. Super neat bug. Definitely gonna float well for you. Tied in a variety of sizes and colors. This is more of a squala color. You definitely tie it in your golden stones, your salmon flies. There's just a ton of variability in the colors that you could choose for this fly. But overall, I think it's a very good pattern and definitely one to keep in your box. Okay, guys, again, it's been Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Bow River Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. Drop a comment. Let us know how this pattern went for you. We always want to know how it goes. If you enjoyed the video and if your flies turned out looking anything like the one in your kit, that's a bonus. But don't give up on them. Keep tying them and see how they go. All right, so cheesy tag. This is bad because I can't look away from my little paper here that I have my cheesy tagline on. So I got a good one for you. It's tying related. You still making fun of me. Okay, here's my tagline, then we're gone. Don't forget to tie them tight, fish them right, and we see you next Thursday night.